Hey, it's Austin James. If you're like me, trying to live your best life while living with diabetes, you can relate to worrying if you're doing a good job managing your diabetes. I use the Freestyle Libre 3 Plus sensor to get real-time glucose readings and see the impact of every meal and activity to make better decisions. The Freestyle Libre 3 Plus sensor can help me live life with diabetes on my own terms, and it gives me more time for the things I love, like being a dad and a musician. Now this is progress. Learn more at freestylelibre.us.
For prescription only. Safety info found at freestylelibre.us.
More Chumba Casino fan mail. Love this. It says, Dear Ryan, I love Chumba Casino. There's so much fun. I love the wild ride from the social slots to the Slingo to jackpots quicker than a 6-time real spin. Everybody's finding their fun at Chumba Casino. Why don't you find out for yourself? Head to ChumbaCasino.com and enjoy hundreds of casino-style games for free with your welcome bonus. Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply.
This episode is brought to you by AWS. Amazon Q Business is the generative AI assistant that can securely understand your business data, summarize results, and streamline tasks. Learn what Amazon Q Business can do for you at aws.com/learn more.
This is an ad from BetterHelp. This holiday season, do something for a special person in your life. You. Give yourself the gift of better mental health. BetterHelp Online Therapy connects you with a qualified therapist via phone, video, or live chat. It's convenient and affordable and can be done from the comfort of your own home. Having someone to talk to is truly a gift, especially during the holidays. Visit BetterHelp.com to learn more and save 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com.
Duke fans, welcome to episode 674 of the DBR podcast. As you can tell, I'm back on my regular microphone here. Hopefully the audio is better for you. This is Jason Evans. It is a Wednesday afternoon, around 2:30 in the afternoon, on a night after the Blue Devils defeated the George Mason Patriots by the score of 68-47, 21-point victory. Donald Wine is with me today. Donald, what did you think of that? You were you in the air while Duke was playing, or did you fly afterwards? What was your story?
Jason, I actually flew back on late Monday night. This is also my smooth jazz microphone. We're both back on regular mics here, Jason. I flew back on Monday night from Miami. I was supposed to land in DC about 11:30 at night, but I didn't leave until 12:02 a.m. So I didn't land until about 3. I was back in my apartment at 3:30. Could not get to sleep until 4, which is why we're doing this podcast on Wednesday, because immediately after the game last night, I went home, I called my dad, and we talked about the game for 30 minutes, and then I went to bed. So I don't know what time it is. I do know it's Wednesday afternoon, but I'm glad that we're talking about a victory.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Talking about a victory is always better. I want to note something before we get to headlines or anything like that, which is that Ken Pomeroy had projected that Duke would win this game 76-59, a 17-point win. Duke ends up winning by 21, 68-47. They're just a lot of people out there who I think were frustrated and angry at this victory and were ranting and raving and stuff. And we outperformed. We're a very good team on Ken Pom, number 3 in the land. And we outperformed his expectations in terms of efficiency margin, points, and all that other kind of stuff. And people need to remember, like we said on the preview, Donald, George Mason's a good team. George Mason would be something like 7th or 8th in the right in the middle of the ACC. If we went out and beat Florida State by 21, would people be complaining? I don't understand. This was no mouse coming into our house. This is a good team that Duke handled fairly easily.
Like I said, like we talked about on the preview, this was a good team from a good high major, high mid-major, whatever you want to call it.
It's high major technically is the power conferences. So high mid, yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, we're talking about a team that outside of the Power Four is part of a conference that is going to get multiple teams into the NCAA tournament. They have multiple teams doing very well. And George Mason's right there in the thick of things in that particular conference every single year. And as we mentioned, their coach last night, we marveled at how he was as a player leading this team to the Final Four for the first time ever back in 2006. So I'm again, it was a struggle. It wasn't a perfect game. We'll talk about the good and bad as we normally do. But yes, this was a quality win. And more importantly, when the committee looks at this at the end of the season, they're going to say, hey, of all the teams they could have played, right? We could have played somebody in the 350s. Instead, we play a
Exactly.
team that's, right outside the top 100 in KenPom from a solid conference and beat them pretty handily on your own home floor. That they're going to take a look at this and say this was a good win by Duke last night, despite some of the details.
All right, so let's get to the headlines. I'll start with this one. Jim Blitch wrote to us and said, and I like this little George. We got a lot of puns on being George Mason. So he goes, after the lid is lifted, Duke jars Mason 68-47. Mason jar pun there from Jim Blitch.
Yeah, we got a lot about Mason. We'll continue with that abound. We have Jared Strauss who writes it all the time. He wrote in a couple, but one that we particularly liked was Bricks Abound with Mason in town, and that can go for both Duke and for George Mason in this case.
Yeah, I also had another one from Ryan Balch who had the same sort of brick Mason theme. He said, playing against Mason, Duke lays bricks, which is absolutely true, especially in the first half.
John Grantland, of course, John Grantland writes in all the time. He wrote, Duke's dominant defense causes unpatriotic performance by George Mason in a grinding win for the Blue Devils. A lot of Patriot themed headlines came in as well, Jason. We saw one. I don't think it made our cut. Actually, no. Go ahead, and I'll see if it makes our final cut.
Yeah, I think you're talking about the one that that I've saved for last. But before I get to that one, Dave Jordan gave us this very interesting one regarding Patriots. Not the kind of Patriots you might ordinarily think of. He was thinking of missiles. He said Duke's shooters launch Scuds in the first half, Tomahawks in the second, and shoot down the Patriots. I like that, Dave.
Yeah, that one was a good one. And then my last one that I have, Jason, I know you have a couple more, is from Bill Slayton. And Bill Slayton writes, "By George," as in goodbye, George. Shaking Masons lay bricks as devils defile their temple. I thought that was really good. A lot of alliteration. I clearly stumbled over that.
Right,
Good
say
job,
that
Bill.
one 5 times fast, man.
I will not. I will not. We don't have time. We don't have time.
The last one I have is Ted Allen. And this is the Patriot one you were talking about. He says, don't tell Belichick. Patriots denied by Duke defense. I love the reference to Bill Belichick, who is obviously now the head coach at UNC, as we've discussed a couple times. Very clever there. Good headlines, people. We love them. Keep them coming to dbrpodcast@gmail.com. Donald, let's get into the good. I will lead you along, sir, and I'm going to start with the defense because I'd
Shocker.
be crazy. I'd be
Shocker.
bonkers not to start with the defense. First of all, I have a question. Is this what it's like? Is this what it felt like to be Virginia under Tony Bennett for the past decade or so? Where, where your team is struggling mighty on offense, but the
Can I
opposing
lead
team...
you? Lead us first on the defense. Lead
Go
us
for it.
with
Sure,
the
yeah.
numbers. Lead us with the numbers.
I will give you some numbers. So, Duke is currently allowing 58.7 points per game. That's the 5th best in the country. We've held 3 of our past 5 opponents under 50 points. Duke's opponents are playing one of the 10 slowest games in the country on offense because the Duke defense doesn't give up open looks. Teams keep on looking. They keep on battling the shot clock, trying to get something, anything that is a decent shot, and they're not able to find it. You cannot fast break against this Duke team. You can't get clear looks from the outside. George Mason only had 2 fast break points in this whole game. Only 2 fast break points. George Mason shot 1 of 9 from 3 in the first half, and they went back to the locker room, Donald, after shooting 1 of 9, and they said, that was unbelievable. We will not shoot as bad as 1 of 9 in the second half, and they were right. They shot 1 of 8 in the second half for a total of 2 of 17, 11.8% from 3. They just did not have any easy looks from the outside. The last time that Georgetown scored less than 47 points in the game was 2019. We smothered each and every offensive action they possibly had. And on the game, here's the biggest number. George Mason ends up shooting 29% from the field. Couldn't even get to 30% against the Duke Blue Devils. Our defense was just in their shorts every single second of this game.
I was gonna say shooting under 30% again. Like that's becoming a theme in this season for the Blue Devils on defense, right? Allowing under 30% from the floor or just over 30% from the floor. Look, if you're shooting under 40% as a team from the floor, you're doing terribly. And so if you're shooting under 30%, you could just extrapolate how bad that is for just from twos and threes. And I think also on the 3-pointers, you mentioned they were 2 for 17. Their one 3-pointer in the first half was that step back, one-legged bank shot that came at the end of the shot clock with them falling
ridiculous.
away.
Yeah.
And so, okay, you chalk that up to, okay, the guys have to give them something. The second half, I don't think their three came until very late in the second half, very late in the game.
And by the way, the one they hit in the second half was the guy, I want to say Anderson, Ryan Ant, maybe. I mean, he was the guy I mentioned on the preview who's like a 50+% 3-point shooter. I was like, watch out. This is the guy who could go off on you. Yeah, he went off for one 3-pointer.
Yeah, so I'm really impressed with how we did on defense. I don't really think there were a lot of open looks that they got. And I've told you, it's a very non-scientific stat. When we put a hand in their face, teams are shooting terribly against us. If we let them shoot open shots, they shoot a little bit better. But I think this time around, it was a lot of contested jumpers. We forced them into doing a bunch of different things that they were not comfortable with doing, whether it was passing the ball away from the basket, whether it was shooting away from the basket, whether it was late in the shot clock, not being in control of their own destiny, so to speak, with a possession. I loved what we did, and we threw different looks at them. It's not like we threw a zone at them or something like that, but it was different guys coming at different players. So in each possession, a player couldn't get comfortable with who was guarding him. And I think that's part of the battle too, right? That's a little detail that we have, especially down the post. If it was man on one play, it might have been Cooper Flag the next play. It might have been Tyrese Proctor on one play. Like it might have been Sion James on one play. And so he doesn't know that guy doesn't know how to react to that person's defense because every single possession he's getting something new.
And you know, the thing about our defense is if you're preparing for Duke, you can't possibly prepare for what we're going to present you because first of all, Duke switches 1 through 5. We even switch when man. I mean, obviously we're going to switch if Malik's in the game. We're going to switch everybody 1 through 5 because, frankly, our point guard Sion James and our center Malik Brown can cover point guards and can cover centers. Everybody switches, but we even switch when man is in the game because he is good enough at body position, at not falling for fakes and things like that. He has quick enough feet and enough recovery that he can even guard opposing point guards,
and Jason, the point of that is it's not necessarily just him. It means we have other guys on the floor who can guard the big man as well. Because of our length, it's not a big drop off. We're not switching a 7-2 man for a 6'1 point guard, right?
Exactly.
We're switching for a 6'5 point guard or a 6'7 small forward. So there's not a lot of drop off there, and we have the width and we have the height to compete with anybody.
Well, right. And when Tyrese Proctor, who I think is sort of, if he gets switched onto a big man because just of his physical size, in terms of his weight, he's the guy who's most vulnerable. We've got enough other guys that they can, and they're good at communicating. I saw several times if Tyrese would get switched onto a guy, someone near him, a Mason Gillis, a Cooper, whoever it may be, would go, wait, we can quickly do a switch here ourselves and put a properly sized guy on this big man, and Tyrese can cover anybody else. The Duke team's switchability is what makes it so good on defense and so impossible for opposing teams to practice against. Like if you're like, okay, we're going to go into practice and we're going to switch everything, scout team, you're going to, if you're switching everything and you're not switching with guys the size of Sion James at your point guard, then it's just not working. You're not really simulating what you're getting against Duke. All right. With all that said, I want to talk very quickly about a few of the individual defensive guys. And I want to start with man, because the official score had him with 2 blocked shots.
Inaccurate.
I don't know what the official score is looking at. There were 4 or 5 shots at least that I saw that he at least tipped the ball, like got a little finger on it, caused it to roll off the rim or something like that. Everything inside was contested by him. And we talked. George Mason has good big men. And he was not intimidated by them. They were struggling to get off shots against him. At one point, their backup center, Emajuru, threw the ball off the shot clock. He was like, so.
So that wasn't even the best part of that play. The best part of that play is on that possession, George Mason got 2 shots off. First of all, there was one that went straight up in the air because man basically kind of tipped it Again, they didn't credit him with the block, but he kind of tipped it and it went straight up in the air and kind of had that high arc, lands on the back of the rim, basically goes over him, over Man Man, because Man Man had just turned around and sees the ball going over him to Imajuru, who then decided, oh, I'm just going to go right at Man Man. Man Man, the funny thing is we talked about both guys, both of the big men at 265 pounds. They mentioned that, Man Man's at 250, right? So he wasn't being easily moved around either. So then Imajuru kind of bounced off of him, thinking, oh, I'm going to get this foul call or something. Then realizes, oh, if I shoot this thing, this guy's going to send it to another planet. So then he shoots it off the top of the shot clock. Now, Jason, in that whole possession, two plays, I almost made it my play of the game. The only problem was Man Man in that whole thing did everything right, and the only thing we got out of it was a team rebound. And I think that's unfortunate that we all we got out of that play was not even two blocks, not two altered shots, just a team rebound. But it showed again, Man he's starting to learn his footwork on defense. And when you learn footwork on defense, when he already had that raw talent, look out, America! Here comes the Blue Devils.
All right, so I'm going to get to some more individual stats. These are courtesy of my buddy Eric Rothschild, a great Duke fan, a brilliant basketball analyst. I crib stuff from Eric for this podcast all the time. And Eric gave me some of these. All right, so in defensive box plus minus, which is a stat that sort of measures how much better is your team in terms of points per possession when you're on the floor versus off the floor. And we're talking here only about defense, and they're measuring different stats and things like that. Box plus minus, Malik Brown is number 1 in the country. Every single player in the country, he's number 1. Sion James is number 3 in the country. Every single player in the country, we've got the number 1 and number 3 guy. Oh, Cooper Flagg, sorry, is number 5 in the country. 3 of the 5 best defensive players in the country are on the Duke team. That's unbelievable. In defensive rating, which is another measure of defensive efficiency per possession, it involves steals, blocks, deflections, stuff like that. Yes, I just said the word deflections. It'll come as no surprise. Malik Brown is the number 2 player in all of college basketball at defensive rating. Cooper Flagg is number 6. And in defensive win shares, minutes plays a role in win shares. If you play more, you'll accumulate more win shares. This is again, another one of these advanced stats that sort of measures how much you contributing to your team, getting victories with your defense. The number 1 player in all of college basketball is Cooper Flagg, again, because of the minutes he plays and because of his impact on the defensive end. But basically, your takeaway here should be Malik, Sion, Cooper are not good, not great, elite, best in the country kind of defenders. I don't know who the ACC is going to give Defensive Player of the Year to, but you got 3 candidates on one team.
It's going to be a team award. It's going to be one of those things that they just write Duke Blue Devils on there, and then all the players can hold up. Because honestly, I think that's the big point of it, right? Is that they all bring different things to the table, but they all are getting it done on behalf of the team. I'm spoiling a little bit my play of the game, so I'm only going to give you part of it. But there's so many plays where even if we turn the ball over, it turns into a turnover for us because we don't give up on plays, especially on defense. And again, some teams, to their credit, if they're able to offensive rebound, which we will talk about, they'll get extra possessions, they'll get extra shots at the basket. But what we were doing is we were so focused on winning the battle of the possession that it didn't matter how many shots it took for them to do it. We were going to win that battle. And even if they got offensive possessions, it doesn't matter if they're taking terrible shots because our defense is so suffocating that all they can do is take terrible shots, even the ones that go in. Despite the fact that we were struggling on offense in the first half, the reason why Mason was struggling on offense was because even their shots that they were making were shots that I'm sure they were like, yo, we should never do that again. We should never have that possession ever again, only for the next possession to be that once in a lifetime thing relived. It was just Groundhog Day for them on offense because every single time we were forcing them to make bad decisions with the basketball. We either took it from them and went the other way, or they did a terrible shot and they just prayed it went in.
Last defensive thing that I have, Donald. We talked in the preview. Folks, by the way, if you don't listen to our previews, you're missing really good scouting on the game because this stuff comes back again and again when we're doing our recaps. We talked in the preview about the fact that George Mason, one of the things that sets their offense apart, one of the things they do extremely well on a national level is get to the free throw line. They drive the lane, they put the ball on the floor, and they get to the free throw line. They have like 2 or 3 different guys who are among like the top 20 guys in the country in terms of getting to the free throw line. They got to the free throw line a grand total of 6 times against Duke. We are a great defensive team, a team that it's impossible to get a good shot against, and we don't foul, which seems to break your brain. I don't know how a team does that. How do you play super physical defense? How do you contest every shot? And how do you not foul at the same time? I don't know, but that's what Duke has figured out in the season. We are not a team that fouls a lot. But, Donald, what's the thing we do worse than anything on defense? The absolute worst thing about the Duke defense is
free throw defense.
Free throw defense. Random, ridiculous statistic. George Mason took 6 free throws. They hit 5 of them in this game. They continued the trend of teams hitting like around 80+% against Duke. On the season, our opponents are hitting 78%, which is just random insanity. We're 350th in the country at free throw defense. It's just crazy. But I'm telling you, that's going to come back to earth. On a truly random stat like that, at some point in the year, our opponents are going to start to hit way less, and they're going to get closer to the national average, which is 71.5%. I don't know. Will we finish the year with opponents hitting 73, 74%? Maybe. That would be a really high number, but they're not going to continue to hit close to 80% against Duke. Think about this. It's super tough to score on Duke. Teams can't even get to 50 points on Duke. When teams start missing free throws the way they're supposed to occasionally, our defensive, we're currently number 2 to a great Tennessee team that holds teams to 30 points sometimes. Outrageous what Tennessee does on defense. Think about what Duke's going to do when Duke starts having opponents not make 80% of their free throws.
I think that's the key here, right? Is the saving grace in our free throw defense being so awful. I say that jokingly, is that they're not going to the line that much. So it doesn't matter, right? You can shoot 5 for 6 if you want to. They shot 6 total free throws in the whole game. We shot 6 in the first half. I think we shot 15 in the second half. So we were getting to the line. We were doing exactly what they want to do. And again, that was throwing off their game. And it wasn't that we were doing controversial things that the ref could sit there and say, oh, that maybe was a foul, but wasn't. It wasn't like George Mason was complaining a lot about how they thought they were being fouled. They were just being suffocated into making terrible shots. And when you take terrible shots, it's very hard for a ref to call a foul on it, because you're just, hey, I'm sorry. If you're going to fall away halfway, perpendicular to the basket, and you're going to shoot some, behind the back shot because that's the only thing you got, I'm not calling a foul on that unless it's really, really bad. The great thing is we're doing so well at this defense is just like last year at times what we did, we're doing it without fouling, and because of that, we're not giving them easy cracks at the basket. That possession, we get the rebound, we're going the other way, and we're turning into points on the other end. When we, get to the line or whatever, I think that's the key here, is that a lot of teams play good defense. George Mason played good defense last night, but they did it with fouling. In large stretches, they did it with physicality. Our guys are doing without fouling, and that takes an element out of the game that a lot of teams really want, especially down the stretch.
All right, I'm going to move on from the defense for a moment, and something that has really, really bothered this Duke team lately. I can't remember the last time we didn't get off to a slow start. Wait, in this game, we didn't get off to a slow start. I can't believe it, Donald. We got out to an 8-2 lead in the first few minutes. We were hitting some outside shots. George Mason, of course, couldn't get anything going. We cooled off a little bit from there, obviously, and we're going to talk about that. But this wasn't a bad start for Duke. And part of it is, I want to mention, speaking of the start, how was there not a shooting foul when Tyrese Proctor threw that lob to Cooper Flag on the opening possession? Cooper's, jumping to catch the ball and dunk it, and he gets whacked. I don't know. I guess he didn't have possession of the ball, so you say he wasn't shooting, but I really don't like that call by the refs. He was clearly in a, getting ready to shoot situation. I think that you can't just tackle the guy the way he did. And I did want to note, by the way, that was a play call clearly from John Shire, that Duke was sort of in a different kind of motion. There was a lot of stuff going on the perimeter in terms of the handoffs and where Duke was going with the ball. And then suddenly Tyrese has it and Cooper's making a cut to the basket. It took George Mason by surprise. I'm just bummed that we weren't rewarded with at least 2 free throws on that play, which I thought was a really nice play call by John Shire to get us off to a good start on our very first possession.
Yeah, that play and that foul call is a statutory one. It's not. We know the intent of Cooper Flag was to take it and throw it through somebody's wrist, but you can't do that without the ball. So
Yeah,
unfortunately,
I still hate it.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things where you like when you look at it, you're kind of like, oh, like there's gotta again, it's just like the play I mentioned with Man. The two things like it's terrible that out of all that we got, ball out of bounds, right? That's not what we wanted. We wanted 2 shots, or we really wanted the and one to try and set the tone for this game. But let's take this into just talk about Cooper Flag in general, right? 24 points, 9 rebounds, 5 of them on the offensive end. 4 assists. Again, 1 assist shy of the 10-5-5. I keep telling people how hard it is to get 10-5-5s in this game. And Cooper Flag tells me every game that it is super difficult because he's always one thing short every single time. He also had 3 steals and he had 1 block. Jason, also important, 8 for 8 from the line. So again, he had more free throws than George Mason did as a team. And he did it on offense. He did it on defense. That 1 block was one where I think Man was guarding whoever it was, and they tried to shoot over Man, and Cooper Flag came over him and said, "No, this ball will not go in just because you got over Man's arms. You still got to deal with me."
Right. That was Jalen. It was Jalen Haynes that he blocked, and Haynes that he blocked on that shot. And Haynes had a great game against Duke, but I thought that was a very intimidating way to start the contest against him.
Yeah, I think it was a few minutes into the game. It might have been during that 8-2 run. So, yes, again, I liked what he did on offense. I liked what he did on defense. There was times where he struggled, but he battled through it. And I think in the end, he hit a couple threes. We talked about his struggles from 3-point. He hit 2 threes, both of them fairly early in the game. And when he shot them, it looked very smooth. And when the shot kind of abandoned him, he went back to what he does best: getting to the lane, getting to the rack. There was one sequence where it kind of felt like he went out of bounds and was about to throw it back in. He found some guy in the last minute, and I don't know who it was. I don't know how he was able to see him because the person was behind him, but he somehow flipped the ball behind his back to that guy who passed it around, I believe, to Tyrese Proctor, who was able to take a shot. Now, I love the fact that we have some plays that are broken, and Cooper still is in control to make that play happen. And that's not always going to happen, right? But last night I felt like he was in control throughout most of the game and was able to, at will, do what he wanted to do with the basketball. And because he's such a triple threat, he can drive, he can shoot, he can pass. On offense, it's hard to guard him. And I think the one thing about him being one of the best players in the country, is that you don't know what he's going to do, and he keeps you guessing on every single play. He has nothing that he does twice in a row. And so I liked that he was able to find his teammates on possessions. I liked that sometimes he said, "I'm going to take it to the rack and see what I can do." And because of that, you end up with 24 points. He's the only Duke player in double figures last night. And it wasn't because we were just going to him every single play. It was, again, the ball ends up in his hands more often than not on most possessions, because he's able to do so much damage either in the air, on the ground, or through the pass.
Yeah, I got a couple additional comments on Cooper, and I want to point out that he did struggle a lot in the first half, 2 of 11 from the field. And when we get to the bat, I want to talk about what was going on there. But he adjusted in the second half, and he went 5 of 9 from the field. Like you mentioned, a perfect 8 of 8 at the free throw line. But the key thing about the second half to me was the first 5 minutes or so of the second half, where he absolutely took over. It was a close game, not super close, but a reasonably close game. And he took over for a few minutes and put the game out of reach. His ability to impact all aspects of the game, you were talking a little bit about it a moment ago, is just shocking for a guy of his age. This was his final game as a 17-year-old. He turns 18 on Saturday. When Duke plays Georgia Tech, it'll be Cooper Flagg's birthday. And I think for Cooper Flagg's birthday, he's going to give Georgia Tech a gift.
Everything.
Of watching him play. Because it is a gift. It is special to get to watch this guy do this at this age. It is just absolutely ridiculous. And I want to segue now to another guy in this Duke team who's been a little bit ridiculous lately, and that's Microwave Evans. I'm not going to use his first name. His first name is Microwave.
Slim.
And yeah, he got hot in the second half, carried our offense. This is now the third time in 4 games where he's had these, like this 5-minute stretch or so where you're just like, watch out, flamethrower in action, and opposing team, there's nothing you can do to stop this. But the thing that Isaiah Evans does so incredibly well is move and find the spots. Like, teams know dude is going to fire it from the perimeter. I mean, the book is out. Since that Auburn game, the book is out on him, and they still lose him. Like, he takes more open threes than anybody on this team, because he has an absurdly quick release. His ability to shoot on the move from three is something that, frankly, no one else in this Duke team has. But it's his ability to see those spaces, to move to the right spot, to find the angles that allow his teammates to hit him for those open 3-pointers. And I feel like when open, he is the surest bet on this team to hit his shot. Him and Tyrese Proctor's close, but he gets that shot up so quickly. He's so confident with it. He shoots it at the top of his apex. There's nothing not to like about Slim Microwave Evans's 3-point shooting.
The thing about him is last night particularly, he was put in that game for one job, right? You didn't have to. I mean, yes, defense is part of that, but he's like, I don't need you to play defense. I don't need you to pass the ball. I don't need you to put arms in passing lanes. I need you to shoot the rock, and I need you to get hot.
He did struggle a little bit on D in the first. I noticed a couple times on D in the first half. He's a little bit lost. You can see why he isn't playing 30 minutes a game, because defense comes first for this Duke team.
Honestly, the last couple of games that he's been in, I thought he's been pretty good on defense. We've talked about how he's improved on defense from what we were seeing kind of early in the year in the spot minutes that he had. But I mean, last night he was there to hunt his game. And Jason, I'll be frank, he shot exactly where I thought he was going to be. I mean, entering this game, he was shooting 50% from the floor, exactly 17 for 34. Now he is 20 for 40. He is shooting 50% from 3-point land. The kid has as many 3-pointers now as Con Knippel in this entire season, but he's taken 28 fewer shots. And he's done it with 3 games where he sat on the bench and did not play a single second.
Yeah.
And almost every game he's playing fewer minutes. So the microwave meter is on. And I don't know what level my microwave gets up to, but there should be an Evans button on there at this point. So I'm liking what I'm seeing. I also like the fact that he's hunting a shot and he's getting it, right? He's moving around, as you mentioned. He's finding different ways to shoot. It's whether in transition, whether it's on the run, sometimes it's spot threes. And even the funny thing is Jason, we haven't seen one element of this game that we know is there. It tendency to put the ball to the hole, or to the ground, dribble to the hole, and yam it on somebody. We've seen him dunk, right? But like, we haven't seen him really go after someone like a Cassius Stanley used to, right? He's just been hunting his three, and now that his three is in effect, I cannot wait to see that time where he fakes a shot and the whole gym thinks he's shooting a three, and all of a sudden you see him with his arm in the rim because he's dunked it off of somebody else. So he keeps adding elements to his game. The next one, I think, as you kind of allude to, the next thing that we're going to continue to add is to build up his defensive confidence, because I think there have been times where he's been really good on defense, and then there's some times where he does look lost on particular possessions. But again, last night it felt like his job was to just be a microwave and hit the three, and he did just that.
Yeah. Last thing on Isaiah Evans, I saw this stat during the game, and I found it hysterical. He's taken 44 shots in the season, 44. 40 of them are 3-pointers.
Mm-hmm. And he's hit half of them.
Yeah.
Can't ask for more. So,
by the way, he's hit half of his 2-point shots. He's 2 for 4 on 2-point shots as well. So, and one of them was an outrageous, ridiculous dunk. So maybe work on the 2-point game a little bit, buddy. No, don't. Never mind. I didn't say anything. Just keep on shooting those threes. You're doing perfectly fine. Speaking of shooting threes, I have one more thing I wanted to hit in the good, and then we're going to take a quick break. I want to mention Con Knippel, who is fighting a nasty shooting slump. I am sure it's driving him bonkers. He knows he's better than this. I look forward to the games, and they are coming, where he reverts to the mean, and his shooting percentage is more like 40% in the season, because he's hitting 60, 70% from three, because that's going to happen. He is not going to go through this season hitting less than 33% from three like he is right now. But I wanted to mention him in the good because He had when the threes weren't falling, he had several really nice drives into the lane. He was one of the few guys in this team who seemed to be able to finish at the rim relatively easily. And I just like the fact that he is able to find something that works when something that he thinks should work is not working. And the last thing I want to mention about him was how many times did Khan hit the floor with the ball in his hands last night? It was
Mhm.
crazy. I counted at least 4 times, I think, in the first half alone, where he fell to the floor with the ball in his hand. He got called for traveling one time, but there was one time he maintained his dribble while he fell and got back up. I was like,
And that travel
Charlie
call
Neal, what's
shouldn't have
going on
been.
here? This is a Harlem
It-
Globetrotters thing.
yeah, that travel call shouldn't have been because he landed on the floor in from the air. It wasn't like he took steps and dribbled
Yeah,
and
but he was
landed.
moving along the floor. I get why they called it. I get why they called
No, no, because again, this is the whole Gerald Henderson thing that used to happen to him all the time is that you have to have a you basically have to take a step. And what he did was he landed on the ground, and even if you move a little bit, you can still do that with the ball and stop because Gerald Henderson would always take a step before he fell. We always told him just go to the ground like a football player, right? It's the completion of the catch. I'm from Detroit. I know how this rule works. But anyway, I liked how he did that. And Jason, the last thing, you kind of segue in this a little bit. The physicality of this game last night was pretty high. The
it. Oh
A10 is
yeah.
no slouch of a conference, right? Like we talked about how physical a lot of their teams are, and George Mason was no exception. And despite the fact that we struggled with it in the first half, I thought we did a great job at overcoming it because there was a lot of times, and even Cooper Flagg after the game, and the post game interviews was saying that, hey, that's a scrappy team, it's a physical team, and we needed to come out with a great mindset of overcoming it. And I thought they did that. And yes, it took some struggles to get there in the first half. And you could see him going through it, especially with some of the missed layups that was happening. But it wasn't missed layups. It was more, hey, I've got to fight through this. And then the second half, he figured out a way to battle it. And so did the rest of the team. Again, with the rebounding in the second half, I thought was a little bit more on point. The footwork that we had on offense to make it where we were having more stable bases. Because as you mentioned, there was a lot of meat on this team. There's a lot of width, and the idea that you could just fight it with more width and more height is crazy. You have to have the footwork. You have to have the foundation to be able to make it where if they bump into you, you're not going to move. And Man was able to figure it out, which I thought he did well in. I mean, even Evans was able to run around it. Cooper Flagg was able to figure it out. Con Knipple was able to figure it out. Tyrese Proctor was able to figure it out. And Sion James was just, hey, I got power too. And he was able to just fight through that. So because they were able to fight through it, that's how this game kind of chipped away in the second half and got it to where it was more of a comfortable win. But make no mistake, that was a very physical team we played last night, and I think that was the game plan was to approach that, and we were able to figure out how that was going to work, and then figure out a way to beat it.
Yeah, and speaking of figuring it out, it is worth noting that Duke was appreciably better in the second half on offense than they were in the first. We scored 43 points in the second half, just 25 in the first half. If you had flipped those two halves, if the game had started out the way the second half, if you played the second half first and the first half second, I don't think the angst that we've seen from Duke fans, I don't think all the, the pulling of the hair out and stuff like that would exist because people would be like, oh yeah, we eased up off the throttle in the second half a little bit as opposed to the way it looks. And I'm not saying that the first half struggles are perfectly fine. They are first half struggles, and they are this team continuing to be to struggle mightily at putting the ball in the basket. But again, I just sort of go back to this team adjusts really well. Our defense is consistent, constant, and always a problem for the opposition. And I'm feeling very positive about them right now. I don't know, mate, I'm feeling really positive.
And John Shire, after the game, he mentioned that 8-2 start that we had. Again, first time we had a good start in a very
Yep.
long time, right? And he said, hey, we're used to being down by 10 or you down by 12 at the first TV timeout and having to fight and overcome that and spend energy. And now he's like, we're trying to get to 40-minute basketball where we have a 40-minute performance. He said, we're not there yet, but we're getting closer. And I think this was a step of us getting closer. We have to build on that and take that on the road on Saturday when we look forward to Georgia Tech. But I like the fact that they were able to, again, the struggles hit and it started out fine. The struggles hit and they were able to overcome it in the second half. We just need to get to that, whatever that 10-minute phase, try and reduce that to 4, reduce that to 2, and then reduce that to 0. That's how this process will continue to work.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. On the other side, you knew it was coming. You knew we had to talk about it. Duke's shooting struggles in the first half. That story when we come back. Donald, we're back from the break, and it's time for the bad. And the Blue Devils really didn't shoot well in this game. This just in. We were 33%, 9 of 27 on three-pointers. But overall, just 37.5% on all our field goals. And all of that was boosted in the second half as opposed to the first half where, man, in the first half, Duke just could not finish in close, especially Cooper Flagg. We mentioned earlier, 2 of 11 in the first half. It wasn't taking bad shots, getting close to the rim and just unable to finish. The refs were allowing a lot of contact. We talked about that a lot in the good and how Duke adjusted to it. But early on, the contact was bothering us, and we were not finishing through it. Coop needs to figure out a way to play through that contact. Duke just missed a ton of shots that rimmed out. And by the way, if just a few more of them fall, this game looks like the blowout that some spoiled Duke fans expected. But I'll give you a stat that really shows it. In the first half, Duke had 11 offensive rebounds and only 3 second chance points. How is that possible? There were plenty of possessions where we got 2 or 3 or 4 shots at the basket and couldn't score. And again, I just want to give you the first half numbers again. 4 of 15 on three-pointers and 5 of 16 on two-pointers. 5 of 16 on 2-point shots? Donald, it was ugly to watch.
I believe also those 3 second chance points, I believe they were all free throws in the first half. And because I think there was one where Cooper had 3 or 4 offensive rebounds, it felt like, on one possession.
It's crazy, yeah.
Only to be fouled and then go to the line and hit 2 free throws. But again, we go back to the shooting woes and even the question that, Lee Maxon, that we talked about for 20 minutes, right? Are we a bad shooting team? And the answer is no, we're still shooting poorly. And again, I look at Con Knippel, he was 0 for 4 from 3, and it felt like, I think a couple of readers pointed out that all of his misses hit the back iron, right? So that's hey, the shot is on. It's not like it's off left or right or that he's missing wide. He's just hitting it a little bit long, and he's doing it consistently. Mason Gillis, he hit the 1-3. That was great. Team ball, to get the ball to him, and he hits a 3, but he was 1 for 4. Caleb Foster was 0 for 2. And so I even Sion was 1 for 3, and I thought all 3 of his shots again looked like they were dead on, except for, they were just too long. I wonder what the answer is to that. And, they say shoot or shoot to get out of a slump. And we keep doing that. But at the end of the day, I think that's, again, what leads to a lot of frustration among people is that when we look and we say we're 9 for, what were we, 9 for 27? So 33%. And when you think about how many threes we do take, a lot of people look at that raw number and they go, okay, 33% seems fine, seems okay. But when you're shooting 27 times, you want to hit more than 9. But as I say, most teams aren't hitting 10 threes in a game, no matter how many they take. So it's one of those things where the numbers are going to make people feel some sort of way one way or the other. And I hope that we are able to, again, just reduce the amount of time that it feels like we're in a slump. Okay, everyone goes into slumps in every game for 2 or 3 minutes, but you want to be able to make that it and limit it to just that, as opposed to what appears to be a 15-minute stretch in the first half of almost every game where it seems like we can't hit the broadside of a barn.
All right. The next thing I have in the bad is the stark difference in our point guards. So, and this is sort of good and bad, I guess, but Sion James played more than 30 minutes in this game. And while Sion was in the game, Duke was plus 31 in plus minus. Plus 31. Caleb Foster played about 12 minutes in this game. In his 12 minutes, Duke was minus 12. That's a 43-point difference in our point guards. And I want to be clear. Plus minus is a deeply flawed statistic if you rely on it too much. I'm not completely blaming any of that on Caleb. I think there was a little bit of randomness in there that he happened to be in the game when George Mason got a little bit hot and Duke got a little bit cold. Some of that's on him, but some of that's on his teammates. But you know, that Caleb's in a really deep funk, and his play is becoming really problematic. Last night, in those 11, 12 minutes, he was 0 of 4 from the field. Caleb Foster had 0 assists. He had 1 rebound and 1 steal and 1 turnover. I mean, that's like, it's not a performance that's helping you at all. Look, he's big. He plays good defense, though not nearly as good defense as Sion James or Tyrese Proctor. But it really feels like he's regressing badly on offense. He's got to figure out a way. The coaching staff needs to work with him and find a way through the wilderness. Or it's possible. I'm not saying I want this. I'm not saying I think this will happen. But it is possible that we see Caleb Foster start to fall out of the rotation. We should not forget that Sion James, his past 2 years at Tulane, was playing 37 minutes per game his past 2 seasons. He is more than capable of playing big, big minutes for Duke if we need him to. And if Caleb can't get things figured out, if he can't give us a boost as we enter ACC play, if he can't get to the point where he can hit shots, my goodness, he can't hit anything, then you have to start to wonder, in a big game, in an important game, how many minutes do you take Sion James out of the game, one of the top 5 defenders in all of college basketball? How much do you take him out of the game and have Caleb Foster in the game if Caleb's not giving you anything on offense? There's no way Caleb Foster should be hitting less than 30% from 3 because he is wide open. When he's on the floor, everyone goes, that's the 5th option. We're not going to let Kahn beat us. We're not going to let Coop beat us. We got a man in the post who can finish in the post. We got Tyrese Proctor, who is an elite shooter from the perimeter. If we got to leave somebody, we're leaving Caleb Foster. Caleb gets nothing but wide open shots. Nothing but wide open shots. For him to be consistently missing is a problem. I don't know what has to happen. I don't know what brings him out of the wilderness, but he is deep, deep in the forest right now.
Yeah, and I don't know the answer to it either. He's been shooting, like you said, he shot 0 for 4 from the floor, 0 for 2 from 3 last night. You mentioned some of the rotations and whether, Sion plays a little bit more. It may not be Sion that gets more minutes. It might be Isaiah Evans, right? Like,
yeah.
And you can have rotations where you have a Proctor, Proctor
or Flag,
or
Proctor
Evans,
or Flag functionally playing,
bringing the ball
Kahn
up
for that matter. Yeah.
Right. You can have them bringing the ball up, and you have more Evans when, again, Evans is going to be a microwave and he's going to be 3 for 6. Hey, I'll take 3 for 6, right? Take it any day of the week, take 50%. So if you're having that, then that's what he has to overcome. And and again, the one thing that I stress to everyone is that Caleb Foster's goal should not be to win that back in one game. It can be a gradual, recalibration of his confidence, but he needs that. Because right now he's not playing confident. And that's what he did last year. When he shot those threes, he was so confident in every single thing. Then it felt like every single time that he had the ball that something good was about to happen. And right now, when he gets the ball, it feels like even he knows that something bad might happen, and that might is enough. So we need the confidence to be rebuilt in him, and I don't know what that takes. I don't know if it. I don't think it necessarily means sitting him down, right? But it again, right now, while he's struggling, you have other guys who aren't. And at a certain point, I wonder if the question is, okay, how do we figure out how to get more Evans time on here? Because he is hitting 50%. Maybe, more opportunities for Tyrese to get shots because he's hitting over 40%. So there's things that are out there in Sion James as well, but it's not all on one person. There's a lot of guys who are struggling on here. Like we could have the same conversation about Mason Gillis. Because despite the fact that he brings qualities on defense, his offense just has not been where it is. And at the same time, we talked about in the last show that it's only going to take a few more shots, going the other way for these guys to be in a position where we go, oh, their offense is pretty decent. So it's not a huge fix that is required here, but the confidence is the biggest part of that for both of those players. And I hope they find it. And I think this is the time to find it before we really get into the grind of ACC season. Which again starts reboots on Saturday. But we have Georgia Tech, we have a 10-day break, and then we have Virginia Tech, and then we're go. then it's games every 3 days, every 4 days. So we're gonna need to get the confidence now because if we don't, I worry that he gets lost in the sauce when we really get into the heat of the season.
All right, so my last thing I have in the bad is this. How many times did Dan Bonner, the color player, the color guy, call Cooper Flag Cooper Cup? It was at least
Oh, he
four
called them
times.
all kinds of Cooper. Cooper Cup was like the most popular. I feel like he had different last names for this. And there was a certain point he just goes, "I'm just gonna call him Flag," and then he proceeded to call him Cooper Cup again, like 5 seconds later.
I was going to say, I noticed that he called him, there are a couple times he called him Cup, like not with the first name. Like it
Yeah.
was just in his head, this guy is Cooper Cup. I know that he tried to explain that he has Cooper Cup on his fantasy football team. Dan Bonner, I don't care who's on your fantasy football team. How about you get the name of the best player in college basketball right, seeing as you're employed as a college basketball color commentator? Maybe. Could you do that for me, buddy? It was just, I was like, good God. One time in the second half, he called him Cup, and I was just like, I'm going to mute you, man. I'm just, this is ridiculous.
I will say he's gonna if his football team's doing that poorly, his fantasy football team, he's gonna have a real problem if he plays Cooper Flag on Sunday. Because the Rams are not gonna throw the ball to him because he's not on their team.
All right. Last thing in the bad, Donald. The George Mason Patriots out rebounded the Duke Blue Devils in this game. Talk to me more about that.
Yeah, they did, and I'm not as concerned at the 43-42 that they out rebounded. I'm more concerned on where they got most of those rebounds, and that was on the offensive end. We gave up 20 offensive rebounds, which again, in a defense as great as ours, that should never happen. And it's not again, some of them were kind of quirky misses because of the wild shots they had to take, right? Like a wild shot leads a wild rebound. It's not always a clean rebound, I'm sorry, a clean miss or deflection or rebound off the rim. Some of those were, we sky the ball high and it like glances off the rim. And there was one, I swear to you, and I feel so bad for Man because I think he could have had 12 rebounds in this game, but maybe six of them were ones where he jumped for the block, but again, jumped or faked. The ball goes high, and by the time it comes down and it hits the rim, he's expecting it to be a kind of a tall rebound that he can go up and get. And he turns around to see the ball like fly just like whiz over his head because it just glanced off the rim. And only person standing behind him is a George Mason player. So there's a few times where we were very unlucky, but really it's about positioning and it's about five guys being positioned to get the offensive rebound because the one thing you want is for them to take terrible shots. The one thing that we are very good at is making teams take terrible shots. But the one thing you need to be prepared for are terrible misses and to be in a position to get the rebound no matter what the miss may look like. That is the key here. And so, and again, that's not all on Man because I thought Man did great on defense last night at creating some of these terrible misses. It's on everyone to have the right positioning on the floor so that when that ball is shot in the air, they turn, they seal their man. This is very fundamental basketball, ladies and gentlemen. You turn, you seal your man, and then you go look for the basketball. And a lot of times, guys were jumping over us because we weren't in position to box them out and get the basketball. So it made it easier for George Mason to take more shots and get more opportunities at the basket.
All right, time for our last item on this podcast, which is the play of the game. Host privilege. I'm going to go first, Donald. We mentioned earlier that block shot that Cooper Flag had in the first half at the very start of the game. I almost picked that. Almost. There was also a play a couple minutes later, about 3 minutes in the game, where Sion James got a steal, like the big man, I blanked on his name now, for George Mason was dribbling. He had his back to the play, and Sion went, "Oh, I'm taking that ball." And Duke raced the other direction. Tyrese Proctor ended up getting a 3-pointer out of it, and I was like, I think it was when it's 3-0, it made it 6-0, and I was like, yeah, this is the kind of defense that Duke plays. That was almost my play of the game, but no, my play of the game came with about 16:40 left in the second half. Cooper Flag had scored on a couple possessions in a row. He'd done drives to the basket into the lane to extend Duke's lead, which had been, a little less than double digits, right into double digits. And then there was this really sweet play where Cooper Flag set a screen for Con Knipple at the top of the circle. And the screen so enveloped the George Mason defender that it left that guy a little bit off balance. And as a result, when Flag slipped the screen and stepped to the right, Both the defenders were left guarding Con Knippel. And Con made a nice little drop-off pocket pass to Coop, who was wide open for, just a couple steps outside the foul line. Could have been a good shot. Wasn't a perfect shot. As soon as Con passes the ball to him, the defense, which has seen Cooper Flagg murder them the past few possessions, like everyone on their defense went, oh, crap. We got to get that guy. And they all adjusted to Cooper. And Cooper threw a no-look. You saw him kind of look away. A no-look pass to Tyrese Proctor in the corner, who could have taken time to tie his shoes, read a newspaper article, and then check the wind speed velocity before he buried the three-pointer from the corner with no one near him. A flick of the wrist later, the ball is splashing through the hoop, and Duke suddenly was up 36-18. We had doubled them. It was the culmination, the last basket in a 16-2 run that started late in the first half and ended with that, moment like the first 3-4 minutes of the second half that functionally ended this game. 16-2 run that Duke went on. But I thought Cooper Flagg, who was the middle of that play, the screen he set was so perfect. Where he went was ideal, and he knew exactly where his teammate was going to be, and he made a really, really nice pass. It was just great offensive execution. We didn't see a lot of that from Duke. But when we saw it, it was beautiful, and that's my play of the game.
That was also my play of the game. So I'm glad you mentioned it. But I will add, but it's good. It's good that we had the same play and the same reason. I thought the game kind of blew open after that, and it felt like at that point, okay, we can, we can not necessarily take it easy, but this is going to be a much smoother affair. And it was the start of a half where we shot a lot better. But again, you mentioned hats off to Cooper. I will add hats off to Tyrese Proctor, because if he doesn't make that shot, we probably don't pick that play. And open shots are a thing that we don't hit a 90% clip this year. So when he did, again, he shot it in rhythm. He shot it with confidence. When it went in, I think they called a timeout right after that. And so you could tell that George Mason was shook a little bit. And that's when you know you got him, right? And that's when you have to capitalize on it. But I like that play because of the fact that, it was set up by the couple plays before where he had the two layups on either side of the basket. And then he had the ball and made everybody go, oh, no, not him again. And he goes, yeah, me, but it's going to be this guy. And I thought it was a great play on all sets. But again, shouts out to Tyrese for nailing that, because if he doesn't, then, okay, maybe we're talking about a different play and it's maybe not as smooth a second half.
With that, we'll wrap it up here on the latest edition of the Duke Basketball Roundup DBR podcast. He is Donald. I am Jason. We're going to be back in your feed like in 24 hours or so, maybe a little more than 24 hours, for a preview of the game against Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech plays tonight, Wednesday night. We're waiting for that result to happen so we can incorporate all that into our preview of the Yellow Jackets. Who can forget what happened last time we played them in Atlanta? Everyone thought it was going to be an easy victory, and it turned out to not be that way. It was, I don't want to hit us with the injury bug jinx or anything like that, but something bad happened in that game last time we were in Atlanta. I will be at the game. Until then, Donald, Jason, Duke Band, play us out, take us home.